All right, let's get started. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us today. I welcome you all to yet another webinar in our Citrix Ready technical webinar series. I hope you, your family members, and friends and colleagues are safe and healthy. My name is Manjunath Agali. I work as Senior Manager for the Citrix Ready technical marketing team, and I'll be the moderator for this webinar today. We have an interesting webinar. I'm sure we will certainly take away something key from this webinar from these great speakers that we have. Before I introduce our partner ControlUp and the main speakers, let me run through a few housekeeping items. First of all, this webinar will be recorded, and that means you will get a copy of this recording in 1 or 2 days. Also, this webinar will be posted on YouTube, and a link of that will also be shared with you all. I request every one of you to share this YouTube link with your team, colleagues, and whomever you think will make the best use of it. I know also some of you may have questions during the presentation or whenever you guys see the demo. So in the GoToW panel, you have questions section. So please use that section to ask your questions. And also by end of the webinar, we have a dedicated question and answer section, so you can reserve your questions until then. So without any delay, now let me call upon our partner and our guest speakers from ControlUp today. We have ControlUp, like I mentioned, who is a long-term Citrix partner, who will show us how to improve the digital employee experience and help us transition to cloud with confidence. To begin with, we have two guest speakers, Joel Stalker and Trent and Ty from ControlUp. Gentlemen, welcome to this webinar. Could you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the introduction, and I'm very excited to be here today with you. So my name is Joel Stalker, and I run product marketing here at ControlUp. Probably good to know is that I have a long history with Citrix. I was almost 19 years at Citrix and worked in various teams together with Adam. So it's great to be kind of reunited with Adam here on the virtual stage. And with me, I have my colleague Trenton. Trenton, if you want to say a few words.
Hi everyone, so my name is Trenton Ty. I'm actually a Citrix CTP, so if you know what that is, it means that we work really hard at understanding the Citrix technologies. So I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to show you guys some really cool stuff.
Great, thank you, Joel and Trenton. Pleasure to have you guys here. And now let me call upon our next speaker, Adam Lotz from Citrix. Adam, welcome to this webinar. Could you introduce yourself and take it over from here?
Yeah, hi everyone. Great to be here today presenting with our partner ControlUp. My name is Adam Lotz. I'm on the Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktops product team. And yeah, as Joel mentioned, he and I go way back. I've known Joel for almost 20 years now. And Trenton, I've known him for about 20 minutes. So we've gotten a great rapport here for this event. And I think it's really a great time to talk about how ControlUp can help you all optimize your deployments and really understand what that looks like from the user perspective and make sure you're delivering the best experience possible. And as we talk about desktop delivery at Citrix, we've really seen a dramatic evolution in the technologies that people are using to deliver that great desktop experience for their end users. So certainly we all know about physical desktop management, right? That was the de facto standard back in the day. Could be frustrating though, because we were sort of limited to the capabilities of that machine. You had that predetermined scalability of the hardware it was running on, and of course, not much flexibility. There's lots of desktop management tools out there, but I think the industry quickly realized there's better ways to do that, especially at scale. And that's where Citrix really pioneered the VDI space. And with VDI, we had centralized management, but you were again tied to your data center capacity. So there's somewhat less flexibility and scalability in that deployment, which leads us to desktop as a service, which is what everyone's looking at today, for really delivering the optimized, centralized management experience for desktops and applications. So Joel, I'm sure you guys see this in your customer base, right? People are looking to make that transition out of the physical data center into the cloud and looking for ways to get reassurance that they're going to deliver the best experience they can.
No, absolutely. It's, I mean, you and I, of course, have been in this industry for a long time. And, this is not necessarily kind of like a new transition, especially not for Citrix, but kind of the move to the cloud is something that in the last few years really has taken off. And we see that with our customers as well. And although the end goal is to make it all easier to manage, we are kind of like in this in-between situation where a lot of people have these kind of mixed environments, and I think that you at Citrix have a great story there, and you see that as well when talking to your customers, right?
Yeah, Joel, it's a good point, right? The last few years have brought real change amongst the attitudes towards cloud computing. And certainly the events of 2020, right, and everyone having to kind of distribute their workforce back to their homes or remote sites across the middle of the last couple of years has changed the way people think about capacity and flexibility in their IT environments. And conversations that I never would have had with people in verticals like, like healthcare or finance, right? People that are very concerned about data sovereignty. Suddenly they're looking at cloud for the new flexibility that it offers and the enhanced scalability and adaptability they get out of that platform. So lots of ways the market's changing, and really we're focused on giving everyone the best option with Citrix products for any need that they have. So we focus that around the Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktops service, which is part of Citrix Cloud Services. And I think the key there I want to reinforce everyone is that, by using our service offerings, you get the best of both worlds, and you can really deliver a hybrid desktop and app experience across a number of different technologies and different needs for your user populations. So by standardizing on the Virtual Apps and Desktop service, we can deliver everything from on-premises access to computers that are actually sitting on someone's desk, all the way out to a fully cloud-hosted deployment that's true turnkey desktops as a service, or even web and SaaS apps that are protected by Citrix technologies. And most of our customers, though, are somewhere in the middle, right? They're delivering that hybrid deployment. They're monitoring that very carefully. They want to make sure their end users are getting the best experience by placing desktops in geos that are close to them. Some of their more sensitive content is being delivered from on-prem repositories, and others might be out in public clouds. And they're really making that choice based on users' scenarios or specific access needs about how they deliver the content out. And you guys do a great job of helping people then validate that and making sure that that environment is ready to go for all these different scenarios. As we look at why people are choosing service-based offerings, I think it's pretty clear, right? When we talk about desktops as a service and Citrix service offerings, the same fundamentals that come in place for any as-a-service offering apply here as well to your desktop and app environments. And I think some of the fundamentals are security, monitoring, and flexibility. And I think those last two are especially important as people look at how they're deploying new access methods and as they're taking on new additions to their data centers, right? So certainly Joel and I, grew up inside IT in providing redundancy for servers and services, and maintaining those racks and racks of hardware and storage and networking gear. And as we see people turning to the cloud, there's a lot of questions that come up about that, right? So you're sort of taking some of that expertise that you had on-prem and now trusting an outside vendor to help you deliver your services. And that's a big leap. And Joel, I ask, as you walk customers through that transition, as they make that jump, what do you see as the biggest challenges that you guys help address?
So actually, I want to give Trenton some credit here as well, because you and I have always kind of like worked on the IT side, on the vendor side, and Trenton actually worked at a large hospital system, deploying Citrix solutions. So maybe Trenton, kind of like as far as the biggest challenges, what did you see when you were working on kind of like the customer side?
Yeah, so my background was in healthcare, and for sure the biggest challenge we had was before ControlUp was the lack of the real-time monitoring, right? So when things break, there's no waiting 15 minutes for the data to get ingested somewhere for you to review. So you need to fix it now, right? So lots of people, what they would do is they would RDP to 30 different servers and open Task Manager and try to find that needle in the haystack. So being able to identify the problems and resolve them quickly, I think is the huge and important strength, especially when you talk about, Citrix is a real-time delivery mechanism for delivering your apps and desktops remotely. So, clicking on things and having it do a cause and effect is really important in that environment. And so obviously being able to monitor at that same level is critical. And I think ControlUp excels there.
Yeah, Trenton, that's a great point. And environments are only getting more complex, right? So we look at Citrix as being a central point to manage all these different cloud resources. But the reality is you could have workloads running in any of a number of different locations. They could be public cloud hosted, they could be private clouds, they could be on-prem on hypervisors, it could be HCI appliances where you're really maximizing your density on-prem. So there's lots of different places that that you need to monitor, and lots of different services to keep an eye on. And as we build this out, right, and we look at Citrix Cloud as being that unified management solution, and our cloud services then can give administrators a great way to access all of their content across their different Citrix properties and across different Citrix offerings. But you all help us tie that together even more and give a unified view of everything that comes to when it turns to end user experience and actually keeping track of that hardware, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we absolutely, we keep track of all of that for sure.
And we see lots of reasons that customers are moving to cloud. And I think probably the biggest one in the last 2 years really comes around business continuity and disaster recovery. So we've seen a big push from folks to get out of their on-prem data centers. Most of the customers I talk to today, if they haven't planned their last data center expansion, they might have just one more remaining. But every day I'm having conversations about moving to cloud and taking advantage of the flexibility and scalability that you get there. Of course, as I said, for us, delivering that hybrid model is most important so that we're not forcing you out of your data center. And using tools that ControlUp offers helps you understand the performance profile and what that looks like as you make that transition. But really, we're all about enabling faster time to value and giving you better integration across the cloud providers as everyone starts to ramp up their environments and take advantage of the hyperscalers that are out there today. And of course, from our perspective, we want to make sure you're doing that as efficiently as possible, right? So we're always looking for ways to help our customers drive down their cloud spending and make sure they've got a right-sized environment. I think you guys have a great story that fits into all of this. And I want to hand it off to Joel to talk more about the ControlUp side of things.
All right, thank you. And I'm just going to remove your control because so you can freely move your mouse and keyboard around there. So thank you, Adam, to kind of like lay out the land on where Citrix kind of can help customers to really kind of like make it easier to deliver the desktop in the most efficient way for each individual customers, because every customer is different. And I kind of wanted to bring back this slide you used around kind of like that transition, that transformation from on-premises to hybrid to cloud, and how you also kind of indicated that, well, customers can be somewhere else, right? I rarely see a fully 100% cloud-based customers today. That is where a lot of people want to be, but where all these kind of like different scenarios can happen. But one thing that's kind of the constant in this picture is this part, which is where the end user kind of connects to their virtual apps and desktops, or their SaaS apps, or all those kind of things. But the user kind of remains the same. The user has a device where they connect to, no matter if that's on-prem or cloud or hybrid or whatever, right? That is kind of the constant factor. But the same what you've seen last year at the start of the pandemic, and kind of like the craziness that ensued as far as what do we do now, right? Because we've seen that as well. We suddenly had customers that overnight went from maybe having to kind of like monitor and manage the digital experience of their users and their employees, from maybe going from 20 offices to 20,000 offices, if you are a company that size. But we've also seen this with smaller organizations. They maybe had like 2 or 3 branch offices, and then across those offices, that's where everybody worked. And all of a sudden, hundreds of people working from home, and they completely lost kind of the visibility they used to have before. And although we are kind of changing back to a certain degree, we are not going to go fully back to how we worked before. And for some people, that means that they go 100% remote. For some people, means hybrid, right? Sometimes they be in the office, sometimes they work remote. But that change is pretty much permanent. And where we exactly settle as far as the percentages, time will tell. Depending on if you ask Gartner or Forrester or IDC, right? All these numbers are kind of different, but everybody knows that this is something that is going to stick around. And for those people who are on the call who are actually familiar with ControlUp, for the 10 years kind of like after our founding, we were very focused on just monitoring that kind of like VDI, EUC kind of Citrix experience. And now with these changes in how we work, we also looked at, okay, so how can we better provide the user, put the user central, and help customers provide them with a better kind of service. Now all these users of them are remotely. And it was actually interesting because I was a sales engineer at ControlUp last year. And you see kind of like a power shift almost. In the past, it was kind of IT that set the agenda and they said, hey, if you're in the office, we can give you this experience and we can guarantee these service levels or experience levels. And if you're working from remote and something doesn't work, it's kind of your problem, right? Because they were the exceptions, and that has changed because all of a sudden everybody is working remotely. So the answer saying like, well, the problem is in your end, right? Because on my side everything is green. That is no longer an acceptable answer. So what we try to do with ControlUp and our technologies is really help our customers address three main challenges, and these are the challenges we hear over and over again. First of all, it's the availability of things like VDI, DAS, SaaS applications. With our shift working from home, we not only work somewhere else, but we also work at different times. Right? There's no longer kind of like that office hours kind of like approach, and people, their family lives kind of like are suddenly part of that balance. And we need to make sure. I mean, none of the people on this call want to work 24/7. I assume. So we now need to bring technologies into the mix that actually proactively, through technologies like synthetic testing, make sure that customers understand when applications are not working before 100 users are going to call you and open a help desk ticket and say like, hey, something is not working. At the same time, we need to kind of like expand that visibility. Right? We could like monitor VDI and kind of like the local network, the LAN, maybe the WAN. But now how are we going to deal with all these local Wi-Fis, these local ISP connections? So it's not just about monitoring the experience from VDI to the physical endpoint. It's also everything that happens in between. And then it's kind of like a transition into no longer just saying like, okay, uptime and performance, but also kind of like bringing the user and the user sentiment into that mix. So these are kind of like the challenges that a lot of our customers are dealing with. And ControlUp really kind of tries to help through our solutions to not just say like, okay, we monitor and give you tools to remediate, but also to see that bigger picture of the complete digital employee experience. And we do that through addressing that in three areas: making sure that all your systems are available, at least that you know if they're available, because there are always things like Microsoft 365, right? I can't really control that. If they break something, I can open a ticket with Microsoft and say fix it, but I'm kind of dependent on them fixing that. But knowing is half of the battle. So making sure that systems are available, or that you at least are aware about their availability, is important. Then, of course, when the user is working, making sure that the systems are green, right? Understanding when there's an issue, and if there's an issue, that you can quickly fix it. If I have an issue with my home Wi-Fi, I don't have to, I don't want to have to kind of call the help desk. I kind of like want them to kind of like maybe reach out to me. So this kind of change in how we kind of serve our end users, has changed, and we help with that as well. And then, of course, making sure that you get the data visible to you so that you make the experience better for tomorrow. Right? It's not just like in the now, it's also understanding how this can be improved in the future. And I'm on some of these areas, I'm not going to go talk through everything you see on the slides. You will be able to get the slides afterwards, but some of these things Trenton will actually show in the demos that follow. But one of the things that, unfortunately, we kind of like needed to make a selection of what we want to show. One of the things that we're not necessarily going to show, depending on the time we have, is our Scout Beast technology, which is really focused around synthetic monitoring. And this is really a continuous testing of all your apps and desktops. So that includes Citrix apps, virtual apps and desktops, either in Citrix Cloud or on-prem, as well as your most popular or most critical web resources, SaaS resources. So this really gives you insight before the user has an issue. if there is maybe an issue with the availability or the performance for whenever the user wants to use it. If I get up at 7 in the morning, I want to make sure that I can start working when I want. And this is really going to help you to kind of give you those insights. Our bread and butter is really around the real-time monitoring. Like Trent had already indicated, if you have a solution that kind of like gives you insights or kind of updates every 15 minutes, what is happening in between those moments, right? Something critical can happen when, especially with like real-time solutions like VDI are, right? I don't want to find out 15 minutes late. I want to know when it happened. So our real-time monitoring across VDI, DAS, as well as our physical endpoint monitoring solution we added last year is really critical in being able to immediately react. And of course, it's not just to react manually, but we also layer automation on top of that so that you can make it better for the future. And then just like how you have your kind of like a unified interface to kind of deliver the desktop, we provide a single console through Solve that gives your help desk employees as well as your IT admins kind of a central place where they can monitor the digital experience. We do have another tool called the console, and Trenton will show you that. That's really more focused on the IT admin functionality, to being able to run actions, scripts, etc. And Trenton will definitely touch on that. So, and we kind of are completely neutral, right? Just like how you can deliver your workloads on all these different platforms, we don't really care, right? We don't really care if that gets delivered from the cloud or on-prem, and if that is Citrix on AVD, what kind of applications. And we are kind of like neutral, but we do bring it together in one single place. And Trenton will show you that as well. All right, so this is where I'm going to hand it over to Trenton. So let me make Trenton the presenter. Here we go. And he will actually walk you through some of these things we just discussed. And for the wow factor. I mean, Adam and I are good talkers. Trenton is a good talker, and he has the goods. So.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, let's get started. So I'm going to start at our main application that we're using for monitoring your environment now called Solve. So this is a web URL that you can access anywhere in the world to see your environment. So right now we're looking at our environment here in ControlUp called Acme.org. And you can see this dashboard is giving us a high-level view of what's going on in our environment. So these are all the metrics being collected in real time. You can see that they're getting updated in real time as well. So that's all very cool. We've got different dashboards if you want to focus on different views. So we've got out of the box, we've got the user experience dashboard that shows user experience type metrics. And then we also have the resources dashboard that shows more of your virtual machine, your infrastructure type metrics. So obviously this view is awesome for like NOCs and any kind of help desk type environment where they have it on the big screen for everyone to look at. But if you wanted to do something custom, we can do that too. So you can see down here at the bottom, I actually have a dashboard that I've been playing with. So I'm going to click on that, and you can see what we're looking at here is a custom dashboard with some custom widgets. And if I click on the Add Widget button, we can see that within Solve, we can actually define our own custom dashboard. So we can look at specific metrics that we want to. We can change the type of chart it is. And this is actually all updated live. So let me actually select something here. Let's try CPU, which is usually quite available. And I can choose where in my environment I want to monitor this. So I'm going to choose all my Citrix resources. And let's just add that widget. Cool. So now we can see this widget's here. It's got the nice display. Maybe I don't want it as a radial graph, so I can go back and edit it again and choose it to be something else. So actually, let's go with the area graph. That's got a nice look to it. Perfect. And so now we're ready to pass this back to our help desk team, and they can set this as the default. So that way, when they open Solve, they can get a high-level overview of what's happening in the environment. So that's the dashboard. So I'm going to move on into our discovery view. So the discovery view is very much like our real-time console today with a couple extra features. So we've got the grid view that everyone's pretty familiar with down at the bottom if you've used ControlUp before, but essentially this is a real-time snapshot of what's happening in your environment. This is updated every 7 seconds, I believe. And then above it, we have the overview of the widgets that are showing us, average metrics of things that are happening in the view you have selected. And then up top, we have our topology bar. So up here, we can actually see all of the resources in our environment, and everything here is clickable and discoverable. So I'm going to start at the clusters view. So I click on that, and I can see we have 2 clusters in our environment. And actually, just looking at cluster 1 here, we can see he's got a high stress level. And if I hover over top, I get this little call out telling me why it's a high stress level. So we've got some stressed hosts and some high logon durations thereabouts. So I'm going to click on this guy, and this will drill into that cluster. And so now I've got my cluster overview selected, but I want to see the hosts within this cluster. So I'm going to click on the hosts resource up here. And here I can see all of the hosts within that cluster. And again, I can see immediately one has a critical stress level. And if I hover over top, again, the call out is telling me, hey, you've got a problem with like your data store, perhaps. These metrics seem really high. And if I just move my mouse to the right, sure enough, I can see that they're color-coded red to identify them that they're having some kind of health issue. So this is a problem. I want to explore this problem. So let's see how we do that in ControlUp. So I'm going to click on these little arrow guys, and you can see it's going to navigate me to the host view and the machines within of this particular host. So let's click, and boom, now we're inside the virtual machine, or inside the host, sorry, looking at all the virtual machines that are on this host. And because we're investigating a problem, you can see up at the top, it says we're now investigating disk issues on this particular host. Down below on the grid view, you can actually see there's a light blue bar that's now covering this. And that's to help you in your troubleshooting journey. So now it's highlighted all disk related metrics because that's what we're interested in looking at. We can actually see it's all up here, disk related. Very nice. Okay, so let's continue our troubleshooting journey. So I can see that this one virtual machine is causing us some problems. So he's probably the one that's at fault, but at this point I can reboot the machine or something else, but I haven't gotten to the root cause yet. So let's continue to drill into this guy. So now I'm drilling into the sessions view on that virtual machine. You can see the topology bar has been updated to actually identify that particular virtual machine that we're on. And we can see we've got 2 sessions now. So we've got one session with a really high disk metric, which is the IOPS. And sure enough, we're looking at disk-related metrics for the session again. So this particular user is causing our problem. So now, we can reach out to the user. We can say, hey, man, what's going on? What are you doing? Why is, what kind of testing are you doing? Is this something that can be done after hours? What's going on? This is hurting our performance. But again, I still haven't root caused it yet. So I don't have enough information. I need to reach out to the user. But I think we can get more information. I can do that by navigating down to the processes view here. And so now you can see I'm on this cluster, on this host, on this virtual machine, on this user, looking at all of their processes. And so now we can see he's got one particular process, dynamo.exe, that's consuming all of that disk. So you can see from the cluster view to the host view to the virtual machine view to the session view, now down to the processes view, we got that whole chain and relationship that ControlUp has built, and we can identify one particular process causing us major pain across our hosts and all the users and virtual machines within. So very cool stuff. So that's kind of the troubleshooting flow that we have for Solve. I want to get into some of the more remote work demonstrations that we kind of touched on here. So let me actually just break out of the investigating and go back to the main view. And what I want to show is a new technology that we've put together for people who are working with those 20,000 offices that we all got thrust under. And what that is we've got this new technology called Remote DX. And what it is it allows us to supplement additional metrics from the user's endpoint into ControlUp. And so we can actually get some really interesting information here. So for instance, what we're looking at here is we're looking at the sessions of everyone connected in. And Remote DX actually works over a virtual channel driver. I actually have a little marketer diagram here. So you can see how it works. So you install the Remote DX virtual channel driver on your Citrix endpoints, and we support iGel, Windows, and Mac OS. So Linux 2 with the iGel support, it's a Linux operating system, but out of the box we support iGel, Windows, and Mac OS. It's just a DLL that you just happen to install, and you enable the virtual channel driver in Citrix, and then we can start populating metrics. So very simple, non-intrusive. It's only ever active when you have a session active. So it can go on even BYOB devices, right? Because it's not spying or anything like that. It's very much only active when your sessions are active and only providing supplement information you can see here. So what does that information look like in ControlUp? So looking at the sessions view, we can see I've got client device score here. I'm actually just going to sort it. So client device score is an aggregate of all those metrics that you saw into one color-coded icon to tell you whether or not the user's having a good experience or bad digital experience. And so we can see we've got 2 users here who are having a pretty insufficient day. So what does that mean? This little house icon here that I can click on actually gives us a beautiful diagram outlining their local network, their local device, and how it's performing, and the connection all the way to your resources, whether they be in the cloud or on premises. So this particular machine, we could see, it's a Mac OS. Sure enough, there it's running over Wi-Fi, 146 megabits, not so bad, but we could see the Wi-Fi signal strength is quite weak. 57% is a pretty weak Wi-Fi signal strength. Potentially that probably explains why he's having 206 millisecond latency between his device and the router. And all of these metrics, of course, are being updated in real time. You'll see that they actually change here as we're just looking at this, because, of course, ControlUp is a real-time product. And then we can also see that we're pinging Google. So we're actually going from the device, we're actually pinging a known source on the internet. So that way we can actually identify, is your routes coming out of your ISP bad, or is that something else? But since your floor here is 200 milliseconds, we can probably easily assume these should be 200 milliseconds less if we can fix this problem. And then obviously we're doing our own type of ICA packet round trip time calculation, and that's with our total session latency metric. So this should probably align very closely with the network session latency ICA one that Citrix has, but this is ControlUp's own implementation of it. And we do show both metrics too. So very cool, very nice display, and we can see this for all users that happen to be having a good experience or bad experience and everything like that. So again, here's one here. You can see it's a very good connection, LAN latency 0. We can see he's actually plugged in over Ethernet. That's why he's got 1 gig connection here, and everything looks very good except for maybe session latency, which might need some exploration, unless we determine that this guy is like located in Australia or something, which is one thing we can do with like our EdgeDX technology or our EdgeDX technology. So that's remote DX, and one of the things that I think where it really comes into play is the additional metrics we have. So we saw that the one user has poor Wi-Fi, and what we can do is if we look at the Wi-Fi metrics that are here, we can actually see that we got some additional information, right? We can see the Wi-Fi SSID, the Wi-Fi signal strength, and there's a Wi-Fi BSSID. This is the hardware antenna address that this user happens to be connected to. So if I'm looking at Wi-Fi SSID, we can actually see that we can have multiple connections to the same access point, but potentially, if it's a mesh network, you could have 2 different access points that are actually sharing the same SSID. So it's very important to get that BSSID to identify the actual physical device that might be having some kind of performance issue. So that's that. And I want to get into a little bit on what we see. Actually, let me go back here. What we see with our integration with Citrix and Citrix Cloud and the on-premises resources that Citrix offers. So here's our environment within ControlUp here, and you can see we actually have 2 environments. We got one for Citrix Cloud and one for Acme, which is our CVAD on-premises. So we support both on-premises and Citrix Cloud. So if you're doing that migration either to Citrix Cloud or to a hybrid data center or pure cloud data center, we can monitor both of your environments at the same time. And then as well, when we're talking about the native console, we can actually do some actions on there. So if you're doing a migration, you want to enable or disable maintenance mode and stuff, you can do that. I'll try to show that in a second. So I'm just going to drill down so we can just see some of the metrics that you see. So for CVAD on premises, this is our high-level view of it. You can see we've got it focused here. We can look at all the published apps, the brokers, what their metrics are, and the delivery group. So let's just go through real quick and just give you a view of what that looks like. So I'm going to click on published apps, and sure enough, we can see all of the apps published in our environments. We can see how many users are using that application, how many are active, disconnected, and so on and so forth. Pretty cool stuff here. If I click on the brokers, we can see the brokers within the ControlUp environment, and we can actually see all the services and how they're doing. So we get like a high-level health check right out of the box with ControlUp testing your brokers. And obviously, if I click on delivery groups, we can see all the delivery groups that happen to be within the Acme environment. And all of these metrics exist for Citrix Cloud as well, obviously with the Citrix Cloud stance, but they're there. So you can get all this cool information here. And what's really neat too is we can actually take these metrics and do automation with them. So we can pick them up and actually execute an action based on the values of these and what they change to or from. So I'm going to switch back to the real-time console now. And let's just take a quick peek at some of the native actions we offer, then I'll show some of the cool script actions that we have. I'm trying to be cognizant of time here. So I'm going to look at the folders view here, and actually let's focus on our Citrix Cloud environment. And so here's all of the resources and folders that we can see within Citrix Cloud. So what's really cool within ControlUp is it gives you that single pane of glass where we can right-click and actually do some management actions here. So you don't need to have your local CDAD console open, your studio open here, and then your Citrix Cloud console open over on this screen or something like that. We can actually take some management actions completely within ControlUp. So if you were doing a migration from, say, your on-premises to your Citrix Cloud environment, we can focus on a delivery group and actually enable maintenance mode or disable the delivery group. So that way when you're ready for your migration, you can flip it on the other one and disable it on this one and so on and so forth. And then just let Storefront do the storefront magic of passing it to the correct broker. So very cool. So let's drill into, I'm going to focus on the Acme one. Let's drill into some of these folders here and see what kind of data we get. So I'm going to drill into our delivery group, this guy, 2019 PBS. And so boom, we can see these really cool Citrix stats that are all getting pulled from the broker. And again, these exist for both CDAD on premises and CDAD service. And again, I can right click on these devices, and if ControlUp is monitoring them with the ControlUp agent installed, we get this action menu with a lot more capabilities than what you saw previously. And so here I can actually enable maintenance mode on this individual virtual machine, or I could send a message to everyone on that machine. If you have a hypervisor connectivity, you can actually do hypervisor actions. Otherwise, we've got the native Windows actions built in for things like rebooting the machine or shutting it down. We can RDP to the machine, or we can take a script action, which what script actions are, they allow you to take any data within the console and you can create a script and you can take that data and pass it as a parameter so that way your scripts have context, right? So that way you can actually do some really cool stuff with this. It's super powerful. It's one of my favorite features. So let's talk about automation. One of the strengths of ControlUp is its automation capabilities. So I keep talking about how we can take these columns and we can actually do some interesting stuff with them. So I want to get into a little demo and I'll show you how the automation works for what that looks like. So I am going to just focus on the machine here and we can look at all the sessions within the machines. But I'm going to RDP to one of these guys. Let me go to this guy. And ControlUp is a built-in RDP manager, so that's very cool. All right, so as he's going to log in, I'm going to double-click on this machine, and we will see I will have a new user session pop up. There it is, right there. That's awesome. So one of the things that happens when you have your resources on premises or on the clouds is that you don't have infinite resources. So there's always contention. So one of the things that we want to do is reduce the amount of contention as much as possible, and that means reducing resources when users aren't being productive. So within ControlUp, we actually have a couple of really cool ways of detecting that. So we can detect the state of the connection. So active means there's like a screen being remoted. If they're disconnected, that obviously means the screen remoting is broken, but the users are still consuming a lot of CPU and memory and so on and so forth. We can look at the idle time and determine whether or not they might have the screen being remoted, but maybe they walked away for lunch or something, so they're not actually being productive there either. And what we can do with these two columns and maybe a couple others is we can actually determine, we can actually make a decision based on that. So let's take a look at that. So I'm going to jump into triggers here. And you can see right here, we've got our two already set to enabled. So these are community triggers. You can just enable right out of the box for ControlUp. And this is session state active. So what is this trigger? So this trigger is looking if the state of a connection goes from disconnected to active within this scope. So within this folder, and you can actually choose different schedules if you wanted it to be active only at certain times. But here we're looking at our VDI and SBC. So that includes our Citrix machines and sessions underneath, and we're running this one action, adjust process party based on session state. So what does that look like in practice? I'm going to focus on this one particular user here. I've got this custom column built up so we can take a good look at it. So this one session that I just logged in, you can see he's consuming almost a gig of memory, and he's doing nothing, right? This is just a session that's sitting there idling. We can see the CPU resources, you know, their CPU process party is normal, so all these processes get their turn in the scheduler, same as everyone else, even though they're not doing anything. So let's see what happens when this user gets into a non-productive state. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to right-click on this session, and within ControlUp, I'm just going to disconnect it. And we'll see that the state, again, ControlUp's a real-time product, so the state will pick up, it'll change to disconnected. ControlUp will detect through that automation that the state is now disconnected, and it's going to adjust the process party of all these processes down to below normal, and it's going to trim the memory working set here. And so, boom, we can see the process priority just got adjusted to below normal, and within a second or two here, we'll actually see the memory working set get trimmed down to as low as possible. So we've purged out all the memory that all those processes were using, freeing it up for someone else. So boom, you can see we went from 1 gig of memory consumption down to 40 megabytes. So this unproductive user here has now freed up 1 gig of memory for anyone else on that machine to be able to do whatever activity that they're doing. So how does it work in reverse? So sure enough, if I RDP back to it, and I'll switch back to the organization view, we'll see that ControlUp will pick up that the state will change back to active. We can see the memory consumption. We just rely on the Windows Memory Manager to page things back in memory. So now we went from 1 gig down to 230 megs, and we'll automatically adjust that process party back from below normal back to normal for all of those processes.
So Trenton, so this is kind of an example you showed where the session state changes from active disconnected and back to active. But could this, for example, when you have workloads in the cloud and people maybe don't log off at the end of the day, and you know that machine sitting there in your very expensive cloud service, kind of like racking up your bill, would there be options to kind of like address that as well?
Oh man, yeah, I'm actually writing some articles about this. So when you talk about cloud machines, obviously one of the biggest challenges you have is exactly what Joel said, is you want to reduce the cost of your cloud resources. And one of your challenges there when you're talking users and the digital experience is you want to have users to have a good digital experience. And one of the ways to do that is have long idle and disconnected timeouts, right? So that way users don't lose their state that they were in when they were doing their working. So the challenge there though is that those timers are global. So they apply to every session all the time. So if you have a 2-hour idle timeout and a 2-hour disconnect timeout, that's a 4-hour window that someone might be on a machine. And if they don't log off the machine at the end of the day, if they just walk away, your machine can't shut down until that user has been disconnected and logged off. One of the really cool things about ControlUp is because we're not relying on the Windows management of sessions, we can actually do log off activities, just like what you described, Joel. But we can actually define custom counters for them. So one of the things we could do, as an example, is we can actually say, actually I can try to build a trigger right now for that. Let's go to advanced, let's go to session. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna look for, let's say we've got that 2-hour timer. So what we wanna do is we wanna detect when the idle time is greater than, let's say 30 minutes. Okay, so we're looking for if idle time is greater than 30 minutes. And actually we want to look for the session state too, because we want this to only apply to say disconnected sessions. So we'll say disconnected. All right, so we've got idle time is greater than or equal to 30 and session state is disconnected. And we want to do it as soon as the sessions are in that state. We want to do it for this scope, but here we're going to change the schedule now. So we're only going to enable this trigger at the end of day from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. So essentially what this means is that now at the end of your business day at 5 o'clock, that 4-hour window in this particular example is now only going to be a 30-minute window for the disconnect session. And we could duplicate this trigger and do the same thing, changing the state to active for the other sessions. And so then here we would write our script action to like log the user off, which I think we have in here too. Bang. and then there you go. The user will automatically get logged off. So it's that simple to build an automation within ControlUp. And then obviously that'll log your users off faster. And we actually have more script actions within ControlUp to do things like stop and deallocate virtual machines in Azure. So we can actually detect on the machine level that there are no sessions on the machine. And if the session count, we can create another automation that says if the session count is 0, just shut down and deallocate the machine right away. So session count is 0, the real-time nature of ControlUp says, picks that up after about 3 seconds and says, okay, there's no one on this machine. We need to run this automation, which will stop and deallocate it. And now your billing, that's to the second, can actually be augmented because ControlUp operates in real time to the second. So when you're talking about your cloud environment, that's going to be one thing that we think is going to be a pretty killer feature. And I'm running some content about that right now, and hopefully it'll be out soon.
And I know we're kind of like hitting our time limit here, and I do want to get to some of the questions we see here popping up on the screen. So actually, I'm going to put this right back in your court, Trenton. Would this product be able to handle random re-registrations of VDAs?
Handle random re-registration of VDAs.
Yeah.
So I guess I need a little more context to that problem. So is the problem that machines are dropping the registration, then re-registering after some time, or is that on startup? Not quite sure, but we can kind of show you some interesting stuff here. So we do detect the registration state, right? So registered, unregistered. So if the machine is breaking its registration, we can actually pick that up and we can actually create a trigger to do some kind of augmented troubleshooting. So maybe you need some more information. I actually have a blog article out that goes over exactly this, where if we detect that, like, machine goes from registered to unregistered, then run these Citrix utilities to actually collect more information. And then you have essentially, once that issue occurs, you're capturing that information as soon as humanly possible, right? So you're getting really contextual information with as little noise as possible. So we can detect when the states change here, and we can either alert you, or we can restart the service, or whatever needs to be done to resolve that issue.
And I believe that we also have a cloud connector view, right? So if there's any issues with the cloud connectors, in the case of Citrix Cloud, we detect that as well, and you could either get alerted or run a script or take action on that.
Yeah, exactly. Let me jump in there and we can take a quick look at what that looks like. So here we are. These are our cloud connector views. We can see we've got 2 machines that are actually connected, and the rest of these are located in other clouds elsewhere that we were doing for our testing. So you can see all the cool stuff here. So we can see if the cloud connector version is up to date or whether it's outdated, whether it's in a disconnected state. We obviously get the performance metrics that are super important there. And we can actually look at the version and all those other metrics. So here's some cool metrics that you can pull for your Citrix cloud connectors.
All right, so let me just see, because there's a bunch of questions. I'm not sure if we have time enough to tackle all of them. Can we see? All right, so can we see traffic flow direction to and from the endpoint to VDIs when troubleshooting bandwidth? So I think this kind of like steps a little bit into our kind of physical endpoint monitoring product, HDX, which we didn't really focus on. So the remote DX functionality, which is really kind of targeted at monitoring kind of that digital experience from a home office point of view when you're running Citrix apps and desktops. We also have a technology called HDX, which is kind of full endpoint monitoring for Windows, Mac, and Linux. And we have a little bit more kind of like granular details, and we can run scripts on physical endpoints. And Trent is pulling it up, but I don't think we have time to kind of like fully show that. But we are also adding some more capabilities to the remote DX functionality Trent that showed, as far as all the different hops and steps, and providing some more details there in the future. And I know we kind of like try to keep these webinars to 45 minutes, so we're already a few minutes over. So I kind of like want to wrap it up with one more question, and then kind of like close it out here. So you did mention for this remote DX functionality that we support Windows, Mac, and then you mentioned something about IGEL. So I've had some customers that started shipping thin clients to people's homes. Are there any other options there beyond IGEL? What are kind of like the options there for customers who do that?
Yeah, I mean, iGel out of the box is pretty fabulous. Like, we can get the remote DX technology set up on your iGel Cloud Gateway, and then it's pushed out to your remote endpoints automatically through that mechanism. It's very, very cool. Sorry, I think I lost my screen, but I think that's okay.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I wasn't sure if you were going to actually show a thin client or anything like that, but
yeah, no, my video just went.
Yeah,
so
no, I took it back
just
into
caught me by
space.
surprise. But yeah, the remote DX technology, yeah, it's very, very cool. Sorry, I lost the question. What was the question again?
If we support other devices than just the iGel. Yeah.
Yeah, we support all manners of like Windows operating system devices. So whether it's Windows embedded on a thin point on endpoint or thin client or anything like that, or Linux even, like the iGel client is Linux, so you can install it on almost any Linux operating system. But obviously out of the box, we just support iGel in that capacity. And any Mac OSs as well. So I believe that includes the new M1s too. That's actually something I can test and validate, but I'm pretty sure we support all Mac OS and the 2 processor architectures.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Trent, for showing some of the technologies. I think the one thing, because there's still some questions left, and we didn't touch on entire kind of like other technologies that ControlUp has beyond kind of like the Citrix virtual apps and desktop service offering. We also do endpoint monitoring. I talked a little bit about ScoutBees, our synthetic testing monitoring. So the best thing to do is talk to us more. But if you just want to be by yourself and say like, hey, how do I get started? How do I kind of like do my own POC? Well, it's totally possible. Within like 10 minutes, you can get this up and running, and you don't have to talk to anybody. You can go to our website, click on the download free trial, and this is kind of like was a new experience for when I started. It actually starts downloading the executable. You kind of like deploy on premises, and from there on, obviously we link to our hybrid cloud for the configuration. But it's really easy to get started, so I recommend you to go there, and obviously reach out to ControlUp or your Citrix rep if you want to learn more. Adam, were there any closing thoughts on your side?
No, guys, this was a great demo, Trenton. Thank you for that overview. I mean, it's fantastic having partners like you guys to help us really deliver the best experience for our end users. And I think you have a great solution out there, and it's great to see you can try that so quickly.
Great.
Yeah, I want to just jump in here and just mention that this is a portable application. So for those of you who know, it's just a single exe you can drag and run anywhere. So we worked super hard on making this as simple as possible to get you up and running. Really
great.
positive.
Thank you, gentlemen. So to wrap up, I see some of the questions there, which are in the questions panel, but definitely we'll get back to you answering them via email. In case if you're missed out asking any questions, or if you realize you want to ask something else, please do reach out to Citrix Ready. The email address would be citrixready@citrix.com. And with that, I want to thank Joel, Trenton, and Adam for being the wonderful speakers for our webinar today. And this was a great informative session. And thank you all the audience being patient and asking wonderful questions. So we'll get back to you definitely with the recording link and also answering to your questions. With that, thank you everyone for joining us today. We'll meet you again in the next webinar. Thank you.